Welcome, everybody, to the next installment, this installment of the Angry Moderate show here on Cable Access Television. It is March. It's March 1st, 2012, the month in which spring is supposed to begin. It's snowing today. I have a cookie with my coffee because I was feeling cold, and so I decided that I would have some chocolate with my coffee, so the double caffeine punch. March, you know, I was, that's a good cookie. I was storm chasing. Yes, when I was younger, I drove around the Great Plains chasing tornadoes, which of course is, anyway. I was watching the Weather Channel one day, and a Weather Channel reporter named Dave Schwartz, who has since been fired by the Weather Channel, once said, and I'm not kidding, he said, "We're entering spring, the season that links fall with summer." Look, if you don't know that spring is the season that links winter, not fall, winter with summer, you know, anyway. At the time, it struck me as funny, but probably what strikes you as more funny is that I said fall. So, kind of, yeah. Anyway, now I'm feeling a little bit like Diane Keaton in Woody Allen's movie Annie Hall, where she's like, yeah, okay, yeah, la-di-da, la-di-da. If you haven't seen Annie Hall, by the way, you're making a huge mistake. And if you're one of those people out there in TV land who doesn't like Woody Allen because he maybe is a bit of a sleaze, you know, the fact that he married his stepdaughter, which could be seen as problematic, the fact that he's in his 70s and I believe his wife is in her 30s, which potentially could be seen as problematic by some people. But if you're one of those people, those self-righteous people out there in TV land who's like, I don't like Woody Allen. Well, why don't you like Woody Allen? Well, he's just gross. Yeah, but what do you think about his films? No, I just think he's gross. Like, what's your problem? You know, there are a lot of actors out there in the world who maybe are gross but are brilliant actors. There are a lot of athletes out there who maybe are gross but they're brilliant athletes. The fact that Woody Allen, maybe in his personal life, is a little less than savory shouldn't have any bearing on the fact that when you see his films as an artist and as a director and a writer, he's probably one of the top 5 film writers and directors of all time. Oh, and if you're one of those women out there who thinks that Woody Allen's movies are anti-woman, watch a little more critically. The reality is that Woody Allen portrays on the surface women as maybe being a little ditzy or less than powerful, but if you look a little more deeply into the film, if you look at the structure of the far more powerful figures, in the end, they win time and time and time again. So, had to make that little rant and little push for Woody Allen films. I would say of my top 5 would be Annie Hall, Manhattan with a young Mariel Hemingway. She plays a 17-year-old. She is the smartest person in the film. It's really a brilliant film. Meryl Streep is in Manhattan, Diane Keaton, Woody Allen, great film. I'd say Crimes and Misdemeanors is my 3rd favorite Woody Allen film. Just the story is unbelievably brilliant. You know, it's hard. I mean, Sleeper, Bananas, Take the Money and Run, all great comedies. I don't know if, you know, maybe one of those comes in 4th. Yeah, I would probably put Sleeper as 4th, and then as 5th, I would probably have to go with Hannah and Her Sisters. Yeah, I guess so. But number 1, definitely Annie Hall. Number 2, definitely Manhattan. Number 3, Crimes and Misdemeanors. Anyway, go out and rent yourself a Woody Allen film and put aside your self-righteous viewpoint of Woody Allen maybe being a less than savory human being and just look at the film for the art, and you may be pleasantly surprised, says the pretentious film critic. Isn't it great to be pretentious? In any event, switching to this camera over here, you'll notice that we have a guest today with us. You're going to have to guess who the guest is as he chimes in during the course of the afternoon. Okay, done with that silly voice. So just keep an eye on the boots, see if the boots move, and try to guess who the guest may be. I'll give you a hint. He maybe spent some time in Alaska. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about politics and economics, because that is what I do on the Angry Moderate TV show. And I want to start with a rant that I heard the other day made by former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin, one of the premier jackasses in the American polity. Now, of course, I can use the word jackass because jackass in itself is not profanity. So this show can continue to be a family TV show, because a jackass, of course, as we know, is simply a quadruped, a donkey. But I'm using jackass in the pejorative to describe Sarah Palin as a figure in the American political and American social system. I think that Sarah Palin is an idiot. But here's the thing. I want to talk about a rant she made the other day. It was very interesting. I was listening to, I think it was NPR, it might have been AM radio, I can't remember, and Sarah Palin started talking about the economy, and she's like, you know, we have high unemployment, and everything she was saying, I was like, and I found myself nodding in the car. Yeah, I agree with you, I agree with. She was talking about the unemployment. She was talking about the fact that, you know, the middle class is getting hammered. She was talking about all these things that I was agreeing with. And then came the clincher where she said, and all of Barack Obama's policies are to blame. And I was like, don't! You lost me there. The argument that Sarah Palin and a lot of people on the idiot right, and let me make a distinction here. I think that there's a distinction between the intellectual right and the idiot right. And I would say that the idiot right are those individuals who simply parrot what's being fed to them by people like Rush Limbaugh or Sarah Palin or Glenn Beck or whatever, and who do it, sort of the public who just parrot it back without having any idea what they're saying, or the supposed pundits, you know, the Sarah Palin, whatever, if she's considered a pundit, who makes these analyses clearly and 100% with an ideological position that she's trying to promote. It has nothing to do with what's really true in terms of our, you know, the last 10 years of what's happened economically and politically. It's simply as a way to bash someone. So it's twisting the facts. It would be as if I said, you know, the Boston Celtics are doing wonderfully this season. Well, they're not doing so wonderfully. Are doing wonderfully this season, and the reasons are X, Y, and Z, and the big reason that they failed toward the end of the season is because of, and I threw in some completely random fact, and everybody went, no, it's because they had 3 injuries. The truth is they had 3 injuries, and that's the reason that at the end of the season last year, things started to fall apart. It was because of injuries, as opposed to my making something up. Well, Sarah Palin and a lot of people on the idiot right make things up. And what Sarah Palin was making up here, she was blaming the high unemployment rate on Barack Obama's policies. She was blaming all of the economic woes that we are still experiencing on Barack Obama's policies. He says, switching to the center camera. Now, here is the problem, or one of the many problems with this analysis. And I use the word analysis loosely because I think that it's not analysis. I think what it is it's purposeful massaging of data as a way to make an ideological or ideological argument in one direction, picking and choosing information and changing it as a way to make an argument. So it's really not analysis, is it? Why do we have high unemployment? Why is the unemployment rate, the real unemployment rate, the true U6 unemployment rate, the unemployment rate that includes people who have stopped looking for work, the unemployment rate that includes people who are part-time who would rather be full-time workers, the unemployment rate that includes people who have PhDs and master's degrees but find themselves working in retail because they can't find professional jobs? No offense meant to people who are working in retail. Done it. Why is the unemployment rate really probably around 13 or 14% rather than the 8.4% that's being reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Well, the reason has very little, if anything, to do with Obama's policies. It has to do with the fact that over the course of 20 years, the government took away basically any possible restrictions on the financial industry. This is one reason. So the financial industry had no regulation. They could cheat, lie, steal, do whatever they wanted without, the Securities and Exchange Commission was like, we're not looking at anything anymore, right? They were a farcical organization who wasn't doing anything in the way of regulating what was really happening on Wall Street with the trading of derivatives and credit default swaps and all of these exotic financial instruments. So you had deregulation that was partially to blame. You had no legal oversight, which was partially to blame. You had the creation of a financialized system where people, basically a Ponzi economy, which, by the way, it hasn't gone away. We're looking at the stock market now at 13,000, and everybody's crooning about recovery and how things, it's good times ahead. It's good times ahead for people who can bid the markets up. I bet you we're going to see the stock market in the next 2 years probably approach 15,000 on the Dow. And for people who can bid up that market, it's good times ahead. But how does that impact the middle class and the poor? I'll get to that. So the argument that Sarah Palin makes is, and the argument that the idiot right makes is that, Barack Obama the socialist, Barack Obama the guy who is, whose government spending is dragging down the economy, Barack Obama the guy who's anti-business, and this is what Mitt Romney, Mitt Romney. If Mitt Romney didn't have, $500 million, if he wasn't worth $500 million, if he was like you or me, you and I could walk down the street and we could pick 10 people who are smarter than Mitt Romney in about a minute, right? That guy, much smarter than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is only smart because he's got $500 million and can get up in front of a camera and flash his pearly whites because he's got $500 million, so he can have pearly whites, right? The idiot right uses information completely incorrectly as a way to rail against liberalism and leftism, which they find not anathema ideologically, but which just makes them feel icky. They just don't like it. They don't like liberalism because liberalism is touchy-feely. They don't like liberalism because it's like, it uses words like, empowerment and magical, which are words, by the way, that I don't like either. I find those words to be a little overused in our lexicon. And I'll get to that. I'm going to rail on the left, by the way. The left is not, the left will not escape today. But the idiot right, people like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin, twist information in a way to try and blame our current economic malaise on Barack Obama. And very little could be further from the truth. While I think that the big mistakes that Obama made with regard to his economic policies was hiring on people like Timmy Geithner and Bob Rubin and all these ex-Goldman Sachs lackeys. That's a big problem. But the reason that we're seeing such high unemployment, the reason that we're seeing an economy that is going to, that is only recovering for the top 1% or the top 5% is because over the last 20 or 30 years, that economy was completely the wild, wild west. There were financial instruments that were being created that nobody has any idea what they are. You had companies making billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in fraudulent profits based upon these mortgage-backed securities on mortgages that weren't worth the paper upon which they were written. There was no regulation and no oversight because everybody wanted to get in on it. It is like the scene in Trading Places where the guys are on the floor bidding up the price of frozen orange juice, and all of the other traders are like, ooh, the Dukes must know something. We better get in on this. And everybody starts running in and getting right in on that Ponzi scheme until, of course, the plug is pulled. So the reason we have such high unemployment is not because we have too much government spending. The reason we have such high unemployment is because you had tons of jobs created during a Ponzi economy, a financialized economy, in which the people were making hundreds of billions, and top 1% was making hundreds of billions in profits based upon trading fraudulent instruments and securities, etc. And when the bottom fell out, they all lost their jobs, and all of the ancillary industries that had been supported by them fell apart. When the housing industry crashed, so did the people who make the floors, and people who sand the floors, and people who make the chandeliers, and all that stuff crashed too. So when you pump up an economy, when you create a bubble based upon this idea of people bidding something up, bidding the price of things up based upon money that they can borrow, based upon lending, based upon lending without any sense that there's any responsibility for the borrower and the lender, you're going to eventually have a crash. And who's going to suffer in the crash? The middle class and the poor are going to suffer in the crash. Look, when a bank can loan money to somebody, either for a home or whatever, when a bank can loan money and package those loans into a security and then sell that security to another bank and never have to worry, I have to do this, I have to go, and never have to worry about what happens to those loans again, of course the bank is going to cheat. What do you think? Bankers are all like these wonderful people who are there to help you get a loan so that you can, realize your dreams of home ownership or realize your dreams of going to college? Are you kidding me? These folks are there to make a profit, and bankers in our country make a heck of a profit. And one of the ways they did it in the last 20 or so years was basically all banking regulation was eliminated. They didn't have to look at your, they didn't have to, in the old days, back before this sham of a financialized system existed, bankers, if you went in there for a loan, had to look and say, well, do you have a good job? Are you going to be able to pay it back? Do you have any, assets that we can, hold if you can't pay it back? Do you have any collateral? Because the risk was theirs. The bank held the risk because they weren't taking the loan and then packaging it up with 10,000 other loans and selling it to some other bank, Bank of America or Citi or whatever, or some bank in another country. They held the note. They held the mortgage. They were liable if you defaulted. Not anymore. So all these banks were just packaging this stuff up and sending it off, shipping it off in these huge bundles of securities. They didn't care. What the heck did they care if they were selling houses to someone who was making $10,000 a year, $500,000 house? Once the mortgage was off their hands, they had made their money up front. And the Republicans, the idiot right, doesn't want to talk about this. Idiot right doesn't want to talk about the fact that the reason that we had this financial collapse has nothing to do with, or very little, teeny weeny bit, to do with government spending. Remember, we live in a fiat currency system. Under a fiat currency system, the government has access to as much money as it needs to have access to. It simply asks the Federal Reserve, essentially, it says to the Federal Reserve, well, we're offering $500 billion in bonds and nobody's buying them. Will you guys buy them? And the Federal Reserve says, okay, we'll monetize that debt. Does that have ramifications? Absolutely. Are we going to see runaway inflation in terms of cost of commodities and energy, etc.? Absolutely. Is that also going to screw the middle class? Absolutely. The middle class is just going to get destroyed. And obviously, that's one of my major rants, is that it's kind of a darned if you do and darned if you don't. Right? But the idiot right, the political right, the ideological right, looks at the current situation and says, unanalytically, this is ideological. They don't say this analytically or intellectually. They say the reason that we are in this economic crisis is we have too much government intervention, we have too much government spending, and that leads to all of these problems, unemployment, stagnation, etc. And Mitt Romney gets up there and he says, if Barack Obama would just get, that's not a very good Mitt Romney. You can't imitate the guy. The guy is so vapid and insipid. How can you even imitate him? It's like, imitating a tree stump. But anyway, Mitt Romney gets up there and he says, the reason we have all this runaway, this terribly flat economy and the high unemployment rate is because we have too much government intervention. We have too much regulation. Oh, so what Mitt Romney is saying, essentially, translation, let's let the rich get richer. Yeah, and then we'll have trillionaires, and they can buy states and stuff like that. And I could have Romneyville, yeah, like Potterville in It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Potter. Anyway, the idiot right, and again, I refer to the idiot right as that side of the right side of the political spectrum that either, if they're the public, just basically mimic back and parrot back that stuff that's fed to them by people like Sarah Palin, who are purposefully manipulate. If you're on the right, if you're a conservative, if you're self-identified conservative, and you agree with what Sarah Palin and Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh and these folks are saying, you could put yourself in that category of the idiot right. Now, I know that may come across as insulting to you, and I kind of apologize, because there's certainly an idiot left too. But the unanalytical stance with which that side of the right side of the political, that part of the right side of the political spectrum analyzes and supposedly analyzes information is stunning to me, is absolutely stunning, because anybody with an analytical mind, even of a small amount, a very small amount, can look at what's happened since 1971, when Richard Nixon defaulted on our gold obligations abroad. And I'm not sitting here saying we need to go back on a gold standard. I'm just giving some little landmarks. Since 1971, and then since 1999, with, I believe it was the destruction of Glass-Steagall. Am I right there? Anybody out there? Essentially saying that investment banks and the bank, your basic ledyard nationals, they could kind of fuse together, and there was no distinction between the banking industry. You could be an investment firm and a bank, and you could kind of fuse together. When these events were taking place at the same time that you had the creation of all of these new types of investment instruments, and the lack of oversight and the lack of any kind of efforts on the part of the Securities and Exchange Commission to do, what was that? Oh, our guest is chiming in. He was agreeing with me, essentially. He doesn't have a ton to say, but since he does, yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, he agrees with me. Since that has occurred over the last 20 years, what you have is a system that was bid to the sky, made a few people stunningly rich, made the top 5% very happy, but created this enormous problem when it all fell apart. And it has to. Ponzi schemes always have to fall apart. You always have to have the bursting of a bubble, because a bubble is based upon people buying into something that has no fundamental value. It only has value based upon the bidding up of it. You know, go to Google right now and Google, the tulip mania. I think it was in Holland in the early 18th century. Google the tulip mania. Google the South Sea mania. These are events in which certain things are bid to the sky based upon people's perceived perception that they have a certain value, and if you get in early, you can make, your fortune. And if you get in late, you're left holding the bag. And everything falls apart, and you are broke. And it's even worse now when we have these very large, very complex societies, America of over 300 million citizens, and you have these huge societies, and when it all falls apart, when the bubble bursts, and these millions and millions of jobs are lost, they are lost by a professional class, a middle class, and sort of that group in the middle who comprise the workers who in either the financial industry or in, again, the ancillary industries, in the housing industry or in the ancillary industries of the housing industry. So you have an enormous amount, again, you have unemployment, the real unemployment rate and underemployment rate in America, at 13 or 14%. But nobody talks about that because, everybody on the left and on the right wants to pump this idea that we're having a recovery. But we're really having a recovery based upon Federal Reserve's creation of loose monetary policies, the pumping of more money into a system. And when you pump more money into a system, you're going to allow that money to be accessed by a wealthy uber class who are going to take that money and bid up markets and commodities and then use the argument that, see, things are getting better. Anyway. Taking a breath. That was a pretty good ramble, wasn't it? So, summing up, he says, moving to another camera. Is that camera on? Oh, look at that. It's awesome. Moving to camera number 3 and drinking some more coffee. Summing up, Sarah Palin's an idiot, but she's not dumb. I think that she's very intelligent. I use the term idiot in the sense that she is purposefully creating a false analysis of what is happening in our economy because she has an ideological axe to grind with the liberal left. And a lot of that axe, a lot of that hatred for the left has little to do with what's good and right about liberal policies, what's good and right about taking care of people, which is what liberals try to do, and is more just about the fact that liberalism just rubs her the wrong way. There's something about the tone of it, the smell of it, the self-righteousness of it that makes her and people on the right just cringe, and so they find ways to rail against it. Now, of course, there is the other side, which is some people on the right who are just essentially don't really care about a lot of other people don't care about the poor, don't care about the middle class, you know, and basically say, look, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and Darwin was right, and it's survival of the fittest, and if you're not the fittest, then you're not going to survive, then so be it. So, you know, that's for another show, isn't it? Back to the middle camera. Anyway, I want to talk about the left, because I don't want to sit here, I don't want you to think that the angry moderate only finds that there is this group of people on the right that I refer to as the idiot right. I don't want you to think that I'm not an equal opportunity basher. So let's talk a little bit about the idiot left for a second. I was listening to NPR this morning, and there was a lawyer for the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, who was talking about she's working on the case that has to do with the anti-illegal immigration laws in Alabama and Georgia. But predominantly this is the one in Alabama. And the law in Alabama, you probably know about it. The law in Alabama basically was created by members of the Alabama legislature. Alabama is a fairly conservative state, in which it articulated, you know, gave rights to, you know, police to be able to stop cars in which they suspected maybe that somebody might be an illegal alien, that they would have to produce papers, you know, their license, whatever, you know, to prove that they were American citizens. You know, smacks a little bit of Nazism, doesn't it? Now, here's my argument against the lawyer, in this case, the ACLU lawyer. Ideologically, I agree with her position. Her position in the case is that the law in Alabama is unconstitutional, predominantly because, you know, there is a part of the Constitution that basically says that there's the supremacy clause, right? In the federal government, the laws that are created by the federal government supersede state laws, even though there are those people in states who say, well, actually there's this thing called the 10th Amendment that says anything that's not specifically articulated at the federal level or in the Constitution is relegated, you know, to the states. So there's kind of this back and forth. But in her argument about what's going on with regard to this anti-illegal immigrant, you know, the law with regard to illegal immigrants, she says things like, you know, what you're doing is you're creating a police state, and it becomes this hyperbolic use of all of these buzzwords that the left love to use as a way to, in their mind, people on the left, get people fired up about their cause. And I got to tell you, people on the left, and this, I'm sorry, but this is the idiot left. Great cookie. This is one thing that I would categorize as the idiot left. I got to tell you that walking around in 2012 and marching about and using, you know, saying that the United States is turning into a police state, all it makes you look like is an anti-intellectual extremist. And worse, it makes you look like a self-aggrandizing anti-intellectual extremist. Someone who is much more concerned with being out with a group of people pounding on, you know, making noise and chanting slogans, but that the sloganeering becomes more important than the actual politics. It's like bumper stickers. You know, it's like the entire argument becomes a big bumper sticker that you put on your car. And of course, what all of that pounding and fist pumping and use of hyperbolic language does is it alienates everybody or a lot of people in the middle. And the middle happens to be the largest group of people in the United States, which is, by the way, one of the things that makes the United States so appealing. You know, one of the things that makes the United States such an appealing place to be is certainly, well, I mean, there are a lot of things about the United States sometimes, you know, that aren't necessarily that appealing, especially if you're up here in the north when it's snowing. No, but one of the things that makes the United States so appealing is that it is a moderate, by its, its very nature, it is a moderate country. Most of what happens, most of the political discourse occurs in the middle. You know, we don't have riots in the streets when an election doesn't go our way. We trust perhaps naively, but we trust in our political system. We trust in our legal system. There are moments in our history in which those things have fallen apart, and there have been large political movements to draw attention to that. And I'm not sitting here saying that there isn't a place for political protest, that there's not a place for huge gatherings protected under the First Amendment to redress grievances, so that when the government is behaving in a way that we would all consider to be anti-democratic, whether you're on the right or the left, both sides would look at it and say this is anti-democratic. But when people on the left, and I will say this is the idiot left, when people on the left are just pounding their fists and using all of this exaggerated language about police states, and it is very alienating to people in the middle. And I know that people on the left, because I lived out on that left fringe for a long time when I was younger, I know that people on the left oftentimes say, I don't care. This is a really important and critical issue. I don't care if, I alienate people. Okay, but know that you do, right? Fine, you don't care that you're out there alienating people, but know that you do, and know that people can't hear what you're saying and the substance of what you're saying because they're too blown away by and alienated by and repelled by your anger, your use of exaggeration, your use of language that is very exclusive. Because people out there on the right, they don't want to hear stuff about, empowerment. It's a different world. But can we find a common language? I don't think that the right and the left right now have found a place where there's a common language. As a matter of fact, I think that a lot of the antipathy that exists in our political system right now between right and left isn't ideological at all. It's just stylistic. That you get someone like Dennis Kucinich who gets up there and makes a speech, or Bernie Sanders who gets up there and makes a speech, and people on the right are like, oh my God, I hate this guy so much. Well, do you hate him based upon what he's saying or how he's saying it? Now, of course, they'd lie because they're serially incapable of actually sitting back and reflecting and saying, no, it's just like how he sounds. I just hate the way he gets up there and uses all of this. I hate the way he sounds, right? I would imagine if there was like a day of honesty. Remember Liar, Liar with Jim Carrey, where he can't lie, right? I would imagine if there was this national day of total honesty, that a lot of the enmity that exists on the two sides of the aisle, the metaphorical aisle in our Congress, in our Senate and our House, this enmity would be clearly seen as just being, oh, I hate those people out on the left. They're so icky, liberal, self-righteous. And the people on the left would be like, oh God, I hate him. He's so stuffy, conservative, preppy, khaki pants, thumb along the seams of his trousers. Yeah, but what about the issues? Oh, I don't know. I can't even get to the issues because I hate him so much. You see where I'm getting with this? So it becomes not about the issue and the actual, what's being discussed. It becomes about the style, the stylisticness. And when the ACLU, when a lawyer from the ACLU is on NPR and she's railing on about police states and this and that, every conservative or even just kind of conservative person who's listening to NPR is going to be like, switch the station, right? I can't listen to her. But is it because you can't listen to her because of what she's saying in terms of the politics of it? Or is it you can't listen to her because of what she's saying and how it's coming out of her mouth and the style of it? Which is it? And I don't think that people, to a great extent, have the ability to sit back and say, yeah, I don't mind liberalism, I just hate liberals, right? Or I don't mind conservatism, I just hate conservatives. What do you think? Mm-hmm. He agrees. Anyway, I think that there is an idiot right and an idiot left. And I think that the idiot right, it is kind of strong, isn't it? But what the heck? I think that the idiot right at this point in time is characterized by people who either parrot back, imitate, mimic back things they hear from right-wing pundits, and well, pundits in quotes, you know, right-wing ideologues and right-wing talk show hosts who are trying to make a buck, right? I mean, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, these guys are just trying to make a living, right? They're just trying to make money. I mean, you know. I mean, Newt Gingrich is kind of running for president, but he's really just planning his next book tour. The guy makes $70,000 a speech, right? He's just trying to line his pockets. You know that, right? Okay. And these people out on the right, these conservatives, you know, they will just, you know, spew back the things that they hear, and they'll rail on the, you know, the left wing and the socialists, this and the that, but without a sense for really what's happened. Not only what's happened over the last 25 years with our economy, what's really happened and why things have fallen apart. It's really because of deregulation. It's not because of government spending as to why things have fallen apart. And the fact that, you know, without government largesse, without government programs, without government spending, you know, there would be a lot more people on the right too, you know, working class people exist on the right, who would be sitting around going, ooh, whoa, how am I going to feed my family tonight? Right? I mean, right now we're talking about a lot of people who are saying that, but it'd be a hell of a lot more people saying that if we didn't have the kind of government spending we've had over the last 4 years. Okay? No question about that. Now, does that government spending present its own series of enormous problems? Absolutely. Not because of the debt necessarily, not because of the level of debt, because, you know, again, we are with an irredeemable currency, and you can mitigate the impact of that debt, especially since the dollar remains the reserve currency of the world. You can mitigate the impact of that over the course of, you know, in the near term. But because every time you add another $1 trillion of liquidity to the economy, it's only a few people who get a hold of that $1 trillion. It's the Mitt Romneys and the Warren Buffetts of the world who get a hold of that money. And meanwhile, everything gets more expensive. You know, I don't make a lot of money. Gas at $4 a gallon, killing me. I went to the co-op the other night. I bought a bag of rice, 2 cans of beans. I mean, you know, right, my mistake for going to the co-op. I understand that, but I like it there. What can I say? I'm mushy that way. A bag of brown rice, 2 bags of beans, 3 oranges, a bottle of cranberry juice, and one other thing. I got one other thing that was good, like ice cream or something. $30. $30, right? Yikes. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of money for me. Anyway, I think that's all I've got to say about that. I think that's all I have to say about the idiot right and the idiot left. Oh, the idiot right parrots back, you know, blah, 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 non-analytical. The idiot left, so concerned with their presentation and maybe emulating different presentations and with using political correctness. Political correctness, that is from idiot leftsville. Like, political correctness drives me nuts. Because as someone who, if you had to say to me, Dan, are you more of a liberal or a conservative? I'd say definitely more of a liberal. But political correctness, where you're not allowed to say this, that, and the other thing because, you know, it's going to offend somebody? Oh my, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So I can't really go to a comedy club because I'd be sitting in the comedy club going, ooh, that, oh, no, can't do, oh, no, right? Come on. You know, the problem with political correctness, and this is a big-time idiot left thing, the problem with political correctness is it presupposes that because of what someone is saying, that that's what they believe, right? Howard Stern, if you were to say, okay, is he liberal or conservative? He's wide open when it comes to his views of humanity. Wide open. He's like, you know, whatever. To each their own. What does he care, right? But he comes across in his presentation and in his comedy as being unbelievably ultra un-PC. So what? You dig down a few layers, he's kind of a liberal, laid-back guy. More of a libertarian politically, but people can't get past that layer. You talk to liberals, politically correct liberals, that are like, I hate Howard Stern. Why? Because he insults everybody. Why? Because he's a bigot and a racist. Oh, no. Right? He's a comedian. He's a salesman. He's an entrepreneur. Be careful. So I think that there is a real problem that we have here in the United States. And that problem is that we have two sides of the political spectrum who stylistically, to a great extent, and also who manipulatively, in a manipulating way, don't want to deal with the real issues and how to fix those issues, because either A, they just can't stand the other side because the other side just rubs them the wrong way, or B, in the case of the right in particular, the political right, they don't want to allow for there to be more power exhibited on the left because it takes away their money. Right? Bottom line, that's what they see. And I'm talking about the wealthy side of the right, the Mitt Romneys of the world. Well, you are listening to, watching, I don't know why, like what are you doing? What are you doing watching The Angry Moderate? I mean, there's other stuff on TV, you know. I mean, do you have Fox Soccer Channel? Oh, it was a brilliant goal! What do they say? I love these guys, right? They're so, you know, the build-up was intelligent and the finish devastating. You know, I love that. So you could go, you know, that's good stuff. Yeah, but you're watching me. I don't know if that shows such great wisdom on your part. But hey, who am I to argue? Because if you weren't watching me, would I be here? Yeah, I probably still would anyway, right? I want to talk about one more thing before I let you go, before you change the channel and go off to make your Kraft macaroni and cheese for dinner, you know, that nourishing meal. Maybe have a Twinkie for dessert. Remember that scene from Ghostbusters? When they talk about the 30-foot long, 15-foot high Twinkie? And the guy goes, tell him about the Twinkie. And Bill Murray goes, what about the Twinkie? Love Bill Murray. Changing cameras. Oh. Anyway, I want to talk about one more thing. I heard that there was something on NPR. Yeah, so I listened to NPR. I listen to all the AM stations too. I listen to 1400 and 1490. I love listening to the conservative talk show guys because I think that they are I think that they're so dishonest. I think that they are so dishonest in their presentation and in their just constant railing against the left. I mean, these, you know, AM radio is the providence, you know, it is the, that's where the right has so much, you know, there's very little left-wing radio on AM radio. The right just gobbles up that time, you know, the stations must be owned by these, you know, right-wing zealots, right, who just say, yeah, what's your talk show about? Oh, it's about, what's it called? I Hate Obama? Great, yeah, you get the morning drive time slot, yeah. And you get all these just dishonest, intellectually dishonest characters on these these AM, conservative AM talk shows. Who, yeah. Anyway, but I was listening to NPR, and there was a announcement that James Howard Kunstler, who is a writer and kind of a political guy who talks about the end, you know, talks about peak oil and the end of energy, you know, like the end of cheap energy, etc. He's speaking somewhere around here. Maybe, I don't think it's at Dartmouth. It might be at UVM. I'm not sure. And the subject is, you know, why we're coming to the end of, you know, cheap energy. I think it was a low energy future. You know, and this idea that because of peak oil and because of, you know, the cost of getting energy, and that we are going to move into this period of time in which energy is going to be, it's going to be harder and harder to find those resources, the fossil fuels or whatever, to power all of the things that we increasingly need to power, right? We need more and more in the way of energy to fuel, you know, all of our needs, and yet we are arguably going to be able to access less and less of that stuff. Back to the center camera. So, it always reminds me of Wayne's World when he does the thing with the eyelids, you know, where he goes like, camera 1, camera 2, camera 1, camera 2, camera 1. I love that. I love Wayne's World. I saw it just again the other night. Man, what a great show. What a great movie. Anyway, here's the thing that is so important in my mind, and in my opinion, to remember. That all of these arguments that have to do with low energy futures and economic distress and unemployment, all of this, like kind of all the gloom and doom stuff, it all applies to a certain class of people. In the United States, yes, there will be a low energy future for the middle class and poor, particularly for the poor, because they won't be able to afford it. And the reason they won't be able to afford it is because as more and more money is pumped into the system, and that money, because of no real regulation, is just captured by the rich, the price of everything goes up, up, up. And we, with our stagnant wages, and we, with our inability to get government assistance, etc., can't access that stuff. Look, it would be a very real possibility for me if gas were $5 or $6 a gallon, and I, wasn't driving this ridiculous teeny-weeny car that, gets 40 miles to the gallon, where you're like, I can't really look out the windows and turn my head, because if I do, I'm going to bump it on the window, right, because the car's so small. If I were driving, because I had to buy a used car, and I was driving, kind of a clunker from the 1990s that didn't get great mileage, and gas was $6 a gallon, I couldn't, there's just no way. I couldn't do what I do, filling up a gas tank for 70 or 80 bucks. I mean, that would be like, that's like a fourth, a fifth, a sixth of my weekly paycheck for one tank of gas. So when people talk about low energy futures, they're talking about there needs to be another phrase there, another prepositional phrase, like another qualifier. It's going to be a low-energy future for the middle class and poor. And when I say middle class, I really do believe that in the next 50 years we're going to see the end of the American middle class. Because the American middle class cannot access the kind of capital and the kind of resources that it needs to access to maintain a middle-class standard of living. It's just impossible. I used to be middle class. I would say that I'm kind of standing on that edge right now. All of these discussions are about, that we talk about when we talk about low energy futures, when we talk about unemployment, when we talk about, it should all be qualified as, for the middle class and poor. Yes, it's going to be a low energy future for the middle class and poor, not necessarily because the energy is not going to be available, it's just going to be available to those who can pay for it, right? It's not going to, food. Do we have access to a great deal of food here in the United States? We still do. Is it going to be are we going to have a difficulty in accessing food in the future? Well, not the wealthy. But 10, 20, 30 years down the road, could it be that we're going to see a very difficult time and I'm talking about tens and tens of millions of Americans being able to access food? Absolutely. At this point, we're talking still at 50 million people who get food stamp subsidies, who get access to food through subsidies from the government. The minute the idiot right comes to power, they're going to step in there, and based upon their fist pounding and promises to their idiot electorate, they're going to, cut off all kind of federal subsidy and say that they're doing it in the, because it's going to be good for the economy. Really? It's going to be good for people's ability to put food on the table. Anyway, we have entered a very interesting time in our evolution as a species. And that interesting time, to a great extent, is based upon the fact that there is an increasing a disparity between who can afford to access those things either that need to be accessed or that have been accessed in the past, right? But maybe won't be accessible in the future. This whole idea of, 20 years ago, everybody could get good dental care. Now, we're watching a lot, millions of Americans who cannot access good dental care, not because the dental care is not there, not because we haven't made great advances. It costs $1,100 to get a root canal here in New Hampshire. $1,100? For a lot of us, it's like, a pair of pliers at Dan & Witt's is $10. Those are the cheap pliers. The good ones are like $20, the alloy ones, right? So pliers for $20 versus a root canal for $1,100. $1,100. A lot of the discussions that we have to have as we look at what is going to happen in the future, it surrounds the issue of social class. And those people on the right who would argue that this isn't about social class are just being dishonest. That's the height of dishonesty. To say, when the right says that this these issues are not about social class. Of course they are. That's exactly what they're about. Right? Plain and simple. It's about the fact that there's money being created, there is money to be made, and that there is only a very small group of people who continue to have access to that, especially in light of our financialized Ponzi system. And those people are going to find that the low energy future is not going to dramatically change their lifestyle, or a low access future when it comes to things like food or whatever is not going to change their lifestyle, but an increasingly large group of people who live on the margins, because the margin is creeping up, right? You know, the margin gets close, you know, if you're middle class, all of a sudden the margin is like biting at your feet, because if you made $30,000 or $40,000 a year, it becomes very difficult to pay for all those things you need to pay for, right? I mean, you know, if you make $40,000 a year and a root canal is you know, $1,000, pliers are looking like a bargain. Anyway, I appreciate your taking the time out of your busy day to listen to me ramble once again about all of the difficulties that we face and about all of the political division in the United States between the right and the left that, in my mind, is either based upon false analysis, manipulation, or stylistic distaste. My friend here, who has been listening patiently, and so patiently, in fact, he's been in a state of a stupor of sorts, a meditative stupor, I think, listening to me, joined us today. And you know, you can join us too. If you would like to, you can give the station here a call, CATV, and come be a guest of the Angry Moderate. Happy to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. But I'm going to be hopping along pretty soon. Hey, I'm Jerry. Where are we for time?
51 minutes.
51, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. So it is, we were...
Home show plug for you.
Oh, home show plug. Tell me more.
I'll be there. Come to my...
Right, so you know, there's the home shows coming up the weekend of March 16th, 17th, and 18th, and you can meet me. I'll give you an autograph. I'm going to be at the home show, spewing my moderate, if not somewhat self-righteous vitriol all around the home show. Spittle flying out of my mouth. And you can come and you can argue with me or pat me on the back when you agree with me. You can get, that's about it. I can't really think of anything else you could get. But come to the home show. Come see the Angry Moderate, me, Dan Weintraub, talking and mumbling and babbling about economics, politics, and all of the stuff that exists out on the idiot right and out on the idiot left that makes it so wonderful to live in the middle. I love living in the middle. Middle is a great place. I hope that you will join me next time for the Angry Moderate. I'm going to finish my Joe. You know the story behind Joe. A friend of mine told me that it has to do... Well, anyway, you can look that up. Google, where did we get the term Joe for coffee? I'm going to finish my coffee. I'm going to finish my chocolate chip cookie. And I am going to go pick up my children and take them out for dinner. Although, I have to check my checkbook and... I don't know where we're going to go. Anyway, the Angry Moderate signing off for March 1st, 2012. Hopefully I should be back on March 15th, right? Beware the Ides of March. Ooh, spit and chocolate at the same time. Peace out. Bye.